is theoretically in the building. Also, over the next day or two, maybe Max Blumenthal will be here. We'll see. Now there's some incredible things are a little bit haphazard. Also, Pentagon warning General Flynn apparently years ago, you shouldn't take payments from foreign governments.
We understand.
We have NAFTA, both completely sacked and then fine, and completely as is in the course of, I think, about 16 hours. We have a bit of a shakeup at Fox News. Jesse Waters in deep waters. And no longer part of the 5. So I guess it's the 4 now, or they find somebody else. I don't know. We have Donald Trump releasing a notion of what a tax plan might be, I guess is the kindest way to say it. It's sort of like, I want to say it's sort of like the Cliff Notes, but in fact, it's really more like the Cliff Notes of the Cliff Notes. It's like the Monarch Notes of the Cliff Notes of the Cliff Notes of the Monarch Notes as a one page. And all that and more, I guess. I know I'm forgetting something. Oh, yes, Donald Trump wants to break up a federal court. He's not sure which one, and he's not sure why.
Could be the 9th. It doesn't matter. They're doing
Could be the
bad
9th.
things.
He's not sure.
Bad guys.
But joining me now, I was getting a couple phone calls. I was going to call you on air.
Did you see my text?
I did not see your text, actually.
I got stuck outside because I didn't have a badge.
You didn't have a badge.
Yes, so I'm unofficial, and I found a way to get a badge because you know what? I'm resourceful, and I got it.
I've heard that you're a resourceful person. Let me just get the camera going here. What's that? Oh gosh, I'm hearing voices now in my head that.
That's better.
Let's see. Is that better?
Yeah.
Is it Ben Carson-like voices where it teaches you
Here, actually,
organic chemistry
Come back over a little bit.
in the middle of the night?
Exactly.
You want to know chemistry, Jack?
Cenk unfortunately cannot hear you, Michael. I have yet to. I mean, I suppose he could. But I have yet to set that up. So Michael just did a funny voice of Ben Carson, but
I'm positive it was
Wasn't that
funny,
funny.
so awesome.
well, actually, now I've just heard from Kelly saying it's not that funny. So
Okay, well.
Cenk Uygur.
Still poll on it.
You don't really need an introduction, but I'll give you one anyways. I think our audience is fairly familiar with you. You are the host and CEO. Are you going to give me your card so that I can?
No, I'm turning my cell phone off.
You are the host and CEO of. Great. The host and CEO of the Young Turks. So both the program and the now sprawling, massive enterprise.
God bless.
So congratulations. And all right, well, it's like I was thinking about what we would be talking about yesterday, and then an hour later that had to change, and then an hour later that had to change.
Of course.
We have not talked, I think, in person since Donald Trump has been president, or at least.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that we've had a sit down like this in any way. And,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit insane, isn't it? I mean, just in terms of the pace of things.
Completely insane, but largely to be expected. I mean, we warned people it'd be insane, and we were right, unfortunately, again. No one says we were right, unfortunately, more than progressives do.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, we thought there was going to be a big difference between Trump and whoever, and it turns out there was.
So, all right. Give me your sense at this point of what's happening in terms of the resistance, broadly speaking.
Yes.
I mean, one of my biggest concerns from the perspective and we both did this in some shape or another during the Bush years. And the thing that really, I think, in terms of the political landscape, the thing that I came out of the Bush years understanding was like, oh, wow, there were a lot of people I was allied with against Bush who I thought shared my ideological perspective, policy issues, issue set, whatnot, but didn't. You know, Jonathan Alter's not as strong of a supporter of Social Security, let's say, than I thought he was.
And the list goes on.
I mean, the list goes on. But that was just like, one that really sort of like, I was like, oh, wait a second. I mean, I always sort of saw him as like an older establishment type. But I thought ideologically there was much more alignment than there was. And my concern with any Republican president is that that's what happens to the center left. That the argument then becomes polarized in that respect, and not so much the leftier lefts can't wage that battle as much because there's a popular front. Give me your sense of whether or not that's your experience or what's happening now in that regard.
Yes, that's such a great question and topic. So I have a lot of things to say about it. First of all, I remember now that we talked after the election, and you made a terrific point about just this, that the upside of what's happening now is that it will galvanize and grow the left, especially in the media. Because you talked to me about, and I hadn't thought of this, that all the blogs grew out of opposition to George Bush. So I think a lot of things will bloom in opposition to Trump. Now, when you get into what is it that we want to bloom in that opposition, that's a great point. And actually the topic of my speech on Sunday in D.C., this Sunday, I'm going to do it at Busboy and Poets. Just quick plug, if you want to join, if you're anywhere near D.C., tytnetwork.com/resistance, and you sign up and get an email or text, and we'll let you know exactly where it is. We're also going to go to the climate change. But I'll tell you the heart of what I'm going to say, which is that the establishment wants to trick you into thinking the resistance is just anti-Trump, and that if we just got rid of Trump, everything would be great and back to normal. No, it wouldn't be great. Mike Pence as president would be almost as disastrous, right? And I don't find that to be a pleasant state of affairs. And even if the Democratic establishment got back in charge, I also don't find that to be a pleasant state of affairs. So, in my opinion, the resistance is against Trump and the establishment. And they will fight that tooth and nail. And the minute you say that, they will rise in their fury. And in fact, they already have against us, one article after another slamming us. Because why? They say unity. You're disrupting the unity. Hey, I'm all for unity. But no one ever asked the question of who are we supposed to unify behind? Here, I have an idea. How about the most popular politician in the country?
Right.
That's Bernie Sanders. So if you want to unify behind his ideas, fantastic. We're going to have the world's best unity. But if you say, no, I'm not going to go with those popular ideas. I'm going to go with unpopular ideas, which my donors want. Well, of course I'm not going to unify behind that. What kind of an absurd demand is that? So they're trying to trick you. And the reality is you have to keep up the fighting on both fronts.
It's interesting because the things that stick out for me that sort of illustrate that is the Jennifer Palmieri, I can't pronounce her name. She was on Meet the Press, I think. Now, this must have been 2 months ago, saying that this is because there's two things here, right? There is the battle that's happening in the Democratic Party or within and without the Democratic Party, largely on the left. And then there's this other battle that is just this larger popular front against Trump. And Jennifer Palmieri was saying, like, this is not ideological. This is just basically Trump is a horrible human being, which is problematic, it seems to me, even from a full-on partisan mainstream Democratic standpoint, right? Like, you're not even arguing that, you don't even want to argue that, like, his policies are bad. Now, this is was earlier where there was some sort of notion, I don't know what the notion was of where he was going to be policy-wise, but now he's basically, for all intents and purposes, George W. Bush, who also, maybe is still drinking and waking up in the middle of the night and, making praying phone calls to North Korea. I mean, he's basically giving us a standard Republican. I mean, no different from Congress. There's no daylight there other than just total incompetence. So there's a failure there to make the just broad popular front about issues, and then there is this other interscene battle that is ostensibly about issues, but they want to make it about personalities. So there's a real avoidance of talking about issues, it seems to me, in both those distinct battles that are taking place.
Yeah, there's a very good reason for that, because they don't want to talk about policy, because on policy, a lot of them agree with the Republicans, and because they're funded by the same guys. So here, look, let's get more specific on that. So because some old school Democrats will be shocked and chagrined to hear that. Outraged. What do you mean? We're the opposition, right? The reason that Hillary Clinton spent, there was 90% of her ads were negative, which is record-breaking. I mean, it just shattered all records and personal about Donald Trump, because she doesn't want to tell you that she's going to fight for the $15 minimum wage, because she's not going to, right? She doesn't want to talk about policy issues that would hit the banks, which are very, very popular, because she's not going to do those things. So it's a cop-out. It's easy to make it personal so that you can distract people with like, oh, Trump's the boogeyman, right? But that's part of why she lost, because people actually want real change in their lives. So their wages going up is real change. Them getting jobs is real change. Ending the corruption is real change. But the Democratic establishment doesn't want to do any of that. That's why it's not an accident that they're making it personal. And to your point about, is it personal or is it policy? Are you kidding me? Trump has now jettisoned almost every populist position that he had. Remember, he said he was going to raise taxes on hedge funds? Well, we just got his tax plan where, shockingly enough, it turns out he's going to do the opposite. He's going to cut their taxes to the bone. So all that stuff is totally gone, and Goldman Sachs is fully in charge.
I mean, I just want to put a finer point on that. Over the past, 48 hours, Donald Trump reversed himself on NAFTA over the course of the past 12, 24 hours.
That's right.
Himself. He also 2 days ago said that we're going to hand federal land to states.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Let me read just January 23, 2016. Donald Trump, don't hand federal lands to states.
I mean, it goes on.
I don't like the idea because I want to keep the lands great, and you don't know what the state is going to do. Now, what he was basically saying is, if you hand it over to the state, what they're going to do is they're just going to privatize this land.
Of course they are.
And now we've decided, apparently, that we're doing that. I mean, it has been... Now, with all that said, he has not lost any support. Mm-hmm. None.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes to the same conversation we've been having, Sam. So, since he lost all of his populist positions that were popular and helped to get him elected, and set a nice juxtaposition as opposed to Hillary Clinton, who was so establishment and status quo, he's now just a Republican Party. That's all he is. It's almost identical to the old Republican Party. So if he would lose support if the Democratic Party pointed out those positions, right? But instead, they scream, Trump's a bad guy, Russia. And by the way, I think my views on Russia are complicated. I think he did do a deal with Russia, but I'm not sure that's good politics. So let's put that aside for a second. So, but if you actually said to the American people, he's giving away your land, right? And the hedge funds he said he was going to increase taxes on, no, he's decreasing taxes on. Look at this. What a fraud, what a liar, what a hypocrite. But they won't say that because they kind of secretly like the hedge fund tax cut because they get funded by the hedge funds. That's the Democratic Party.
I feel like, maybe it's just the media that I tune in, but I feel like I hear them saying he's filled his cabinet with Goldman Sachs people.
Well, they do say that. Yes, that's fair.
I feel like I've heard that quite a bit.
But again, that's borders on the personal, right?
Well,
they don't talk about the policies that has led to.
Everybody knows what that means. We knew what it meant when people were saying, Hillary Clinton speaking in front of Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. Or Obama today.
Or Obama, which I want to discuss with you. But, people know what that means. And the idea, he wants to give tax cuts to the wealthy. We hear that all the time. That's standard, it seems to me. Democratic.
But I got to jump in there for a second, Sam. You're right, but so the proof's in the pudding. So that's why this tax plan of Trump is more of an important point for Democrats than it is for Republicans. Because we always knew where Republicans were going to stay, and we always knew they were going to try to cut taxes and transfer trillions of dollars of value from the middle class to the rich. We knew that, right? But the Democratic Party, this is their testing time. They can talk Goldman Sachs, he's for the rich, right? But are you going to vote with him or are you going to vote against him? And my guess is that a lot of those corporate Democrats on things like the repatriation tax, the tax holiday, will vote with Donald Trump, and lo and behold, corporations will get trillions of dollars in tax cuts.
I mean, I am skeptical even of that, to be honest with you. I know they want to. I mean, all you need to do is Google Chuck Schumer repatriation plan and look in October of 2016. He had one. They had one.
Yeah, Obama had one.
It involved infrastructure and whatnot, and I'll talk a little bit later in the program why that's such a bad idea. But all you need to do is Google 2004 American Jobs Creation Act, and you'll understand. But okay. So you have Democrats at the very least. I don't know how sincere they are, but I feel like Democrats are saying all those talking points. Donald Trump clearly is surrounded with Goldman Sachs people. He has clearly backed off just about every populist position. There's no repeal of Obamacare. Maybe they have another plan supposedly that the Freedom Caucus. I don't know. I haven't looked at my computer in the last half an hour, so maybe it's fallen apart already. But he has not shed any support. I mean, so here's my point. Is it possible that, I mean, certainly he was on the trail talking about these things. I mean, is it possible that there's an overstatement as to how much of support that really drew? I mean, because if he's not, now maybe it's too early and it takes a long time. There's a lag, right? I mean, that, he's abandoned his positions and maybe we won't know until 6 to 8 months out. I mean, but when you look at, let's say, a guy like Ossoff in Georgia, right, who is, Obama 2.0. I mean, the guy, and he literally, I think, has studied speeches and does the same cadence, walks that same line, does better than a Democrat has ever done there before. Now, also, we have a similar example in Kansas, right? And I think we're about to have a similar example in Montana. But the point being that there is not a universality to this. I mean, you know where I want the Democratic Party to go, and I think it's, I think at the very least, Bernie Sanders is not going away, and it seems to be, sort of they're going to follow his lead for as long as they have to, and right now they have to on some level. I mean, well, their sincerity,
at least rhetorically, some of the time.
Of course, yes. I mean, but there's, we do have them filibustering Gorsuch, and the arguments they made about Gorsuch, I thought were exactly the ones you'd want, right? It was about, you're going to be for the big guy, we're for the little guy. That was the structure of it. I mean, that's where
Al
Democrats
Franken did a good job there.
But even the ones who were not good, parroted that to some extent.
Well, in the beginning, they went with the weak sauce. Aren't you just going to do what Trump tells you? Which is, he can just say no,
right?
And that's a horrible line of questioning. But you're right. Towards the end, they got better and had the line of attack of little guy versus big guy. So I mean, big business is actually the most unpopular thing in the country. It's more unpopular than mainstream media, more unpopular than politicians. So anytime you attack big business is actually great politics, but the Democrats don't do it because that's the same donors.
Right. And all right. So what do you make of President Obama giving that speech to Cantor Fitzgerald, $400,000, and he released or I should say, his spokesperson released a statement which I didn't find terribly compelling.
You think? Yeah. So, well, look, this goes to exactly what we've been talking about. Are the Democrats sincere or are they not sincere? And I would argue that they're not. So President Obama, totally tone deaf, thinking, I'm going to give a speech to Cantor Fitzgerald, a financial institution. It's about healthcare. What? I did healthcare, right? And that's topical. Now I'm going to get paid $400,000. It's leagues better than Hillary Clinton, only in terms of strategy, because he's not going to run for president anymore. Hillary Clinton did it showed exactly what was wrong with her campaign, which is hubris, which is the thing that I was pointing out all along, giving those same kind of speeches, but right before you're going to run for president. What a horrible, horrible political idea. But in terms of policy, it's the same thing. Obama was super soft on the banks. and they were his top donors in 2008, and then lo and behold, none of them got prosecuted. That is not a goddamn coincidence. It just isn't. It just isn't.
Do
Okay.
you think it's that he didn't prosecute them because he got paid by them, or do you think that he got paid, he got supported by them because he's the type of guy who wouldn't prosecute them?
So that's part and parcel the same thing. So it's a great point, and I want the audience to understand that, which is that Obama is not a evil guy who sits in Hawaii going, how shall I work with the bankers to undermine Americans, right? No, of course not, right? So the reason they funded his campaign is because they knew something we didn't know all the way back in 2008. They had those private conversations with him that we hadn't, right? Because they're in positions of power. And they knew he wasn't really going to rock the boat. He wasn't really going to go for change on the outside, continuity on the inside. So, and then second of all, Obama is part of the same groupthink. If you asked him today, hey, why are you doing this Cantor Fitzgerald thing? I'm positive that he would genuinely be hurt by that question and surprised by it and go, what? No, these are good guys, and I'm already out of office, and what difference does it make? But what he doesn't realize is he's been in that same bubble for so long that he now thinks like Cantor Fitzgerald. He now thinks like the bankers do. That's his friends, and they're not like evil people either. If you met him in a cocktail party, you'd think that's a perfectly nice guy.
Right? No, it's probably a couple I would say, oh, that guy's sort of an a-hole.
That guy's a little questionable, but right. So the Democratic Party partly got seduced and partly got pre-selected by these donors, and so that goes to my overall thesis, which is Republicans are paid to win by their donors, and Democrats are paid to lose by their donors. So that's why the number one line you hear from Democrats for the last, 10, 20 years is, there was nothing we could do. There was nothing we could do. Yeah, you were pre-selected to be weak and miserable and just take your losses and go home.
Let me read a little bit of the statement that Josh Ernst put out.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, let me just read some of the statement. As we announced months ago, President Obama will deliver speeches from time to time. Some of those speeches will be paid. Some will be unpaid. And regardless of the venue or sponsor, Obama will be true to his values, his vision, and his record.
That's true. He is true to his values.
He recently accepted an invitation to speak at a healthcare conference in September because as president who successfully passed health insurance reform, it's an issue of great importance. With regard to this or any other speech involving Wall Street sponsors, I just point out in 2008, Barack Obama raised more money from Wall Street than any candidate in history and still went on to successfully pass and implement the toughest reforms on Wall Street since FDR. Well,
agree to disagree.
Well, that's true, but was it commensurate with the need is really the question, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's just been since FDR. It's just been a series of deregulation.
Yeah.
And so the bar is pretty low to make that statement. And while he'll continue to give speeches from time to time, he'll spend most of his time writing his book, which, look, I don't begrudge Barack Obama $65 million for the book deal that they have because, people are going to go out, they're going to buy that book. That's exactly how I want, frankly, my former presidents to make their money.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree.
Putting their ideas out there, and maybe if he takes a salary as he's chairing Habitat for Humanity or he's takes a salary for going around and working on the voter registration. All that. But this is an example of exactly what you're talking about. And we can go back, and one of the most revealing things from the WikiLeaks email dumps, it seems to me, was and I don't know which one it came from, it escapes me, but where it indicated that Michael Froman, who ultimately became the trade representative who did TPP, who was a city group official, was basically the guy who had given Obama the wish list of cabinet officials and nailed it.
Everyone but one person on that list became Obama's cabinet, directly handed to him by Citigroup.
Well, it's not handed to him by Citigroup. It's handed to him by his friend, his trusted advisor. And
exactly.
You're not going to turn around and say, my trusted advisor doesn't know what he's talking about. And
he doesn't sit there and question that his trusted advisor just got paid an enormous amount of money from Citigroup. And hence are in that same group think the banks are have our best interests in mind. They work so hard. They've got to make millions and millions of dollars. And they've got to gamble with the depositors' money. How else would they do it? It's just overburdensome regulation if you don't. I mean, the whole spiel, right?
I mean, if I'm hanging out with you all the time, it's going to be hard for me not to say, there's some value to YouTube. Right? I mean,
sure, that's right.
And I mean, you can. This is when Elizabeth Warren says policy is personnel. I mean, this to a large extent, this is what they're talking about. It's just various groups have their worldview, and the problem is, the real problem is not so much that Barack Obama has his trusted advisors all come from Citigroup and that world, and he doesn't see a problem with it. The real problem is that's the world that tanked our economy in 2008.
Yep.
That's the world that has led to an over-financialization of our economy that is basically just full of middlemen and arbitrage, and they're just, I like being at a casino, but I don't want that in charge. This is not economic activity as much as it is like they're just gambling with each other at the table.
Yeah. So recently I had a beef and continue to do so with Common Cause, which is a pretend progressive group in Washington who actually fights for the status quo and against change. So and online in social media, we had somebody in other Washington circles, in progressive circles, that's halfway supported us. Like, oh, interesting thought, right? Well, that's good points they're making. We should consider this. And online, they were attacked by the Common Cause guys as they said no, quote, smart and respected person would support Cenk Uygur or Wolfpack. Okay, and Wolfpack's points to get money out of politics. Now, what is that? That's a threat that we're going to kick you out of the club. Okay, and we do not approve. No respected person. Why do I bring that up? Because that's what's going through Obama's head. If Obama does these kind of speaking engagements, all the quote-unquote smart and respected people will say, oh, yes, great job, wonderful, makes sense, very presidential, giving a speech about health care, and they'll pat him on the back. If he goes out to Standing Rock, the first time he does it, they'll be like, oh, look at that, standing up for the little guy. Way to go, Barack. The third time he does it, they'll call him Jimmy Carter. And they'll call him weird. And they'll say, oh, well, in retirement, he's starting to lose it a little bit. I mean, look at what happened to Bernie Sanders. As long as he was doing a unity tour and he was doing press conferences with Chuck Schumer where everything was okay. The minute he stepped out of line for a tiny second, Washington Post, Bernie Sanders is weird again. Okay,
right.
So that's why Obama doesn't want to lose that respected title. He doesn't. To him, his legacy is everything, and his legacy is determined by the Washington bubble. So he's never gonna go to Standing Rock twice or wherever it might be.
We may
he's
not
gonna keep
see
on
the
going to Wall Street.
His walking shoes.
I would love to see those walking shoes one day.
That he promised us 8 years ago, and I think like he does not even think about it. Like,
no.
We are spending so much more time than he thinks about this because for him it's just reflexive. This is who he is. So let me ask you this. If you present this perspective online, right, like you on Twitter right now, the Obama thing, you get savaged. And it's interesting because I've watched people who are not Bernie bros, let's put it that way, saying, hey, it's wrong for Obama to do this. And I think for them, it's sort of like, it's poor optics. It makes me, it's not who Obama is. Now, hold that thought for a moment, because I think you and I would differ on that perspective. But they're still sort of like, oh my gosh, how can he do this? They're getting attacked, and they're sort of shocked at like just how virulent the Obama bots can be. And I went back and forth with David Dane a little bit, who is like, I tried to put out something on Twitter saying to the effect of, well, I think people should, because there's a lot of like, you're begrudging Barack Obama money when you wouldn't begrudge any other president. Now, I happen to think that probably everybody who's making an issue of this made an issue of Bill Clinton going and giving
Hillary
a speech
Clinton.
to a brutal dictator.
No, I'm trying to contain myself and not curse. But anybody who says you wouldn't have done it
curse.
to,
right.
you wouldn't have done it to any other president, fuck you for accusing us of racism when we're way more liberal than you and care about the issue 1,000 times more than you do. So don't give me this bullshit about, oh, you wouldn't have done it to any other president, except for the fact that we're on the record for doing it to Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and every other president. Fuck you for having a different standard because it's your buddy Barack Obama and you're invested in protecting him.
It's stunning. And it's... I don't want to belabor it too much. I mean, I think everyone is on sort of the same page here. But it's interesting whether or not people are going to revisit their perspective of Obama or think that he's just, making a mistake from an optics standpoint. Because, look, somebody offers me $400,000 to go give a speech. There's very few places I wouldn't take that money to speak to. But, $400,000 for me, who doesn't have a $65 million book contract,
a little bit different.
A little bit more. But, I mean, certainly if somebody offers me $5,000 for a speech, and I can't do the math here, but if somebody offers me $5,000 for a speech, there's a lot of places I wouldn't do it.
That's absolutely true. And I think that the way to think about it is, let's say ExxonMobil or, JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, is going to offer me $400,000 for a speech. Here's how I would deal with it. I'd take it because $400,000 is a tremendous amount of money for me. Okay. And then you know what I do? In my head, I would think, that's the last speech I'm going to give. Okay. So if you try to get the second speech, that's where you lose all principles.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying? You go in there and you breathe fire to their face, take their money, and then know that you're not going to get invited back.
Right.
That's the deal.
Right. And I don't think it would occur to him. I think he will do a little bit of his tisking, which is classic Obama.
Yeah.
And I think it's him. I think it's like he doesn't do it for window dressing. He does it because
that's who he is.
That's who he is. And all right, but let's not spend more time than is commensurate with Obama. But it's just interesting to me that he if that makes people more aware of what is problematic about the Democratic Party, or at least a part of the Democratic Party. Because largely speaking, we're talking about just the most powerful people in the Democratic Party. I mean, you look at like what's going on in the Congress. You've got a significant number of Democrats. I think the majority of the caucus now is supportive of a single payer. They are almost to a person are supportive of expanding Social Security. Senate, obviously not as much. But so what happens next year? I mean, map out the next 16 months to me. I mean, till we get to 2018. Like, what are the priorities for people like us?
Okay, so first of all, on the Democratic Party going in the right direction, well, they get there through us pushing. If we don't push, they don't get there. So perfect example is Medicare for All. In the House, when the Just Democrats joined John Conyers and Bernie Sanders and all those guys and the Nurses Union in pushing for Medicare for All and putting the Democrats in the spotlight, there was 121 Democrats who had not signed on to Medicare for All. That number, last I checked about a week and a half ago, was down to 93. So, and John Conyers has publicly thanked Justice Democrats and the Nurses Union for pushing people in the right direction, and we moved 30 Democrats to being in favor of it, and hopefully we'll keep pushing. Why are 90 Democrats in the House not in favor of Medicare for All? Michael Tracy for the Young Turks went and covered Dianne Feinstein town hall. In the town hall, she said, "Oh, Medicare for All, I'm not in favor of that. That's a government takeover." I was like, "Oh, for Christ's sake!"
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, look, I don't like Dianne Feinstein. She said, "If it's a government takeover, I'm not for it. If it's fixing something." And it's neither of those things. I mean, she's clearly avoiding the topic. But
no, you're not. Using government takeover of medicine is what she said. One, it's factually nowhere near true. Medicare doesn't take over medicine.
Right.
That doesn't make that. What a profoundly ignorant thing to say. The beloved and cherished and respected Dianne Feinstein apparently knows nothing about policy. And number two, that's odd. When you use the Republican talking point 101 of the last 2 decades and you call Medicare for All a government takeover of medicine, you might be a Republican.
Right.
Okay. So, number one, we keep on pushing and start heading them down that road. Number two, when push comes to shove, you put a spotlight on their votes, because in the past, TV would cover for them. They would say pleasant things on air, then they'd go and vote with Wall Street and with the pharmaceutical companies, etc., and nobody would hold them accountable. We're going to hold them accountable. That's the whole point of our journalism drive and hiring more people, etc., right? And thank God we did, and Michael Tracy had that camera there, and we wound up recording Feinstein saying that, right? So number 3 is primary them. So I do not...
particularly in a place like...
California,
where that is it's jungle primary. There's going to be 2 Democrats on the ballot, one way or another, and so
yeah. Well, there's 3 layers to that. So let me go through that real quick. So if you don't know, justicedemocrats.com, that's now the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Over about 250,000 people have already signed up. We've raised over $1.2 million. We just announced our first candidate in St. Louis, Cori Bush. And we're going to run dozens of candidates in Democratic primaries.
What is the process in which you vet the candidates?
So that's actually the longest and hardest part. There is a 4-stage vetting process, and
extreme vetting.
It is, in fact, extreme vetting. Because, look, guys, I love you, and over 8,000 people have been nominated, and keep nominating people. Go to justdemocrats.com. If there's a leader in your community, please nominate them. We want real people. We don't want politicians. Cori Bush is a nurse. She was a teacher, a pastor, right? She grew up in that neighborhood. That's exactly the kind of person we're looking for. So, but we have to be super pragmatic, because this is not about fun and games. It's not about sending messages. It's about winning.
Right.
Because the only thing we care about is policy. And you're going to get that policy if you win in politics. But the Democratic Party has lost sight of that, and all they care about is politics. They forgot, no, the end goal is supposed to be policy, where we get actual change. So, we look through it and we see, do you know your stuff? Are you a real leader in the community? How progressive are you? So I just talked to Crystal Ball earlier in the week, and you remember she ran for Congress, of course, in 2010. And I asked her, hey, did they ask you, the Democratic Party, when you said you were going to run in that district, did they ask you more about policy or more about money? And she gave me the same answer that almost everybody gives me, which is, didn't ask me about policy at all. All they asked about was money. Okay, how much money can you raise? How much money do you have? Money, right? So we ask about policy. So after you go through that vetting process, 70 people have already gone through. Those are some kick-ass candidates that are from those communities, that are wonderful people. We actually have to convince them to run, because giving up your day job if you're a doctor in that community or you're a small business owner, that's a hell of an ask.
Right.
But we're asking real people. So when we run these candidates, and already the hate has begun from the mainstream press and honestly some parts of the so-called progressive press, okay? How dare you? You're hurting the Democratic Party. So let's challenge those assumptions for a second.
Because you're hurting the Democratic Party because you're running primary candidates?
Yeah, you're hurting the Democratic Party because they claim you're focusing on Democrats when you should be focusing on Trump. But I am focusing on defeating Trump and the Republicans. You need good candidates to defeat Trump and the Republicans.
Right.
We had your establishment Democrat. She lost to Trump.
You're building the weapons or the tools right now to defeat Trump, rather than just going and trying to scratch at him with your fingernails.
Yeah, exactly right. So the layers to it. Jungle primaries in California, where it could be 2 Democrats in the general election. There is no excuse for not primarying.
No. Dianne Feinstein, there's a myriad of reasons why she should be gone.
Right. So when you hear any reporter or pundit, Democratic Party official say you should not do primaries in California, know that means we don't want any change. We think that whoever is in power now should have all the privilege and should never be challenged. So they're frauds if you ever hear that. Okay, the second layer to it is safe blue seats. Why should I have Jim Himes, the representative from Goldman Sachs, representing a deeply blue Connecticut district?
Right.
Why don't I have a progressive representing a deeply blue district? Of course I'm going to primary him. That's crazy not to primary him. Why should we accept that we have these very conservative Democrats in very blue areas? So, of course we're going to do that.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, number 3 is...
And the funny thing is, let me just jump in here. This is always what you hear, right? It's like from from establishment and full-on partisan Democrats. It's like, the time to deal with this is during the primary. Right?
Okay,
So it's
great.
always like, it's time to deal with this during the primary. And so the idea now that, like, when you actually have the resources to actually primary, then they're like, well, wait a second.
Exactly, of course, because they don't want that challenge. So, and number 3 is red states. we don't accept the conventional wisdom that corporate Democrats do better in red states. There's actually no proof of that, right?
Right.
In fact, all those blue dog Democrats lose their second election. They might win in the beginning when people don't know what their record is, and then they come in and they run their re-election efforts on, I'm Republican light, so why don't you vote for the Republican? And people go, okay, I will.
And this, of course, is distinct, I would imagine, to the district. I mean, there are some districts, like the suburbs of Atlanta, where you're going to have, I think, a guy like Andy Ossoff. I mean, I don't know that there's really that his platform, a different platform would have really done much better for him. But there are a lot of districts, it seems to me, where a populist message would actually get you much further.
Of course. Look at Dave Bratt, right?
Right.
So with a deeply populist, deeply anti-banker message, he unseated Eric Cantor in a historic primary for the Republican side, which then leads me to another point. They say primaries hurt the party. Well, I've got evidence that Republicans primary the hell out of their candidates and have crushed the Democratic Party in the last 20 years.
You don't think the Democrats have the Republicans just where they want them?
If anyone has mastered the art of making themselves believe that you win by losing, it is the Democratic Party. So I'm tired of losing. The audience is tired of losing. The whole country, every progressive is tired of losing. So let's start winning. JusticeDemocrats.com. So if I run an anti-banker, deeply populist candidate in a red state, we're going to have 100 times better chance of winning that seat than a corporate shill like Manchin or McCaskill.
And that to me seems to be one of those things where, it's proof of concept, right? I mean, how many is it going to take a red seat that has been a traditionally red seat that is maybe, a plus 15 or 20 Republican? One or two of those in this cycle, and then and particularly then they come back in 2020 and win again. You're fundamentally sending a different message, and then you can simply bypass, right? I mean, because the model here, it seems to me to be, is like, we're going to get the best candidate and trust that we're going to be able to raise money with that person, rather than starting with someone who's got a lot of money and hope that they end up being a good candidate. Because like the first thing the DCCC asks is, can you self-fund? And that's literally the first question there.
So, look, that's what people are sick of, right?
Yeah.
So they will mock us for running real people. I guarantee it. Write it down in stone. They'll say, oh, these people don't have experience. They're not pragmatic. And I think the mainstream press, honestly, is just as complicit. I think they pretty much work for the establishment Democratic Party. And so they say you're not pragmatic. Wait a minute. The establishment Democrats have lost the White House to a guy who had a 37% approval rating on the day of the election, to an absolute monster and buffoon. They lost the Senate, they lost the House, they lost the Supreme Court through gigantic, negligent malpractice, right? And they lost 69 out of 99 of the state legislatures. What part of that is pragmatic? What part of that is knowing how to win? No, I would argue, and I do this with facts, they are incontrovertible facts, that you are the losers, that you are not at all pragmatic. In fact, like I said earlier, it makes me think, the facts make me think that you want to lose. Like that it's not that the person running wants to lose that race, of course not. It's that the donors fund weak Democrats who wind up losing. Are you self-funded? Okay, great. You stand for the rich. Do you know a lot of rich people? You stand for the rich. Well, that party, if you're on the left, is structured to lose because you are by definition hypocritical. Oh, I'm for the average guy, but I took all my money from billionaires and I represent billionaires. And then the voters go, screw you. I can see right through that. You're a fraud. That's why the Democratic Party, even with Trump in office right now, is less popular than the Republican Party. That's unbelievable. The Democratic Party should be at 60-70% approval rating when you're fighting against a monster like Trump. Yep. By the way, there is a guy who's at over 60% approval rating fighting Trump. His name is Bernie Sanders.
I've heard of that guy. He's getting around.
That's how you fight. That's how you win. That's pragmatic.
All right. Look, I got to wrap this up because I've got some other people. I have to ask you this question, and this is something that we're going to have another discussion about. But Wolfpack.
Yes.
We have, briefly touched on this in the past. let me just be clear on what our difference in perspective is.
Yeah.
I am concerned that the Constitutional Convention, we just tell people Wolfpack is a pack set up to get each state, or to get 2/3
Yep.
states to vote to have a Constitutional Convention to amend the Constitution to make sure that we basically perceive corporations not as people, and we don't equate money with speech. I'm not sure of the actual wording, but something to that effect.
And public finance.
And public finance.
And let me just appropriately amend one part of what you said. It's not a constitutional convention. It's the Article 5 convention.
Okay.
There's a reason why that makes a difference. I don't mean to be a stickler.
Okay.
Yeah.
So an Article 5 convention. Now, my concern is that there is only legal theorists who have said that you can hold these and make it specific to one topic, as opposed to other legal theorists who say, yeah, that's not the case. I mean, we've never tested this.
Yeah, no,
so we don't know how a court would rule.
Yeah.
And my fear is that it's just as likely that you're going to get a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution or something to that effect.
Yeah. So, Sam, if you're not knee-deep in the issue, I totally understand why that's the perception, right? So this is what we care a lot about. So we've done all the research on it. There are no legal theorists who say the convention can run away. What they say is, I don't know. And I don't know is not a legal theory, right? And I've debated almost every lawyer. I'm going to go debate Floyd Abrams and the guy who was a lawyer for Citizens United at Oxford in May, right? And all they have is, I don't know. So let me explain. So
what we don't know, what we do know is there's never been a test of the case of this.
That's actually not actually true. So there are many different kinds of conventions. The original convention was a constitutional convention, and the states actually authorized them to rewrite the Articles of Confederation. So there's this misnomer out there that it was a runaway convention. No, it was convened for that purpose by a majority of the states, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do. And we had a Common Cause lobbyist under questioning in Hawaii said, and by the way, the thing that you call a runaway convention, which it wasn't, produced arguably the best document in human history. And she said, well, I don't know about that. Well, I know about that. That's the thing that you're supposed to defend, the Constitution. It's wonderful. And in the Constitution, it tells you how to amend it. So that's a constitutional convention. Second thing is, there's conventions that, for example, the Electoral College is a convention. It never runs away. The states have had over 200 conventions, which would be just like an Article 5 convention. There are rules for it. We've done it hundreds of times. All of the state constitutions remain intact. So it is fear-mongering, and it actually started with a talking point, I'm not kidding you, from the John Birch Society back in the 1950s. So they wanted to protect the status quo, and so they put out these things that unfortunately to this day guys like Common Cause are using. So in this case, we've done it many, many times before. And Sam, we're not winning. As progressives, we're losing 49-0. So we're not in favor of the status quo. We've got to go for change. Can Republicans also use a convention? Yes, but Republicans can also vote. That doesn't mean we should end voting.
Well, yes, but they also control, like you say, the vast majority of state houses.
But Sam, these same guys, when the Democrats had a supermajority, said, no, this is not the right time for a convention. The Common Cause of the world fight against the convention when Democrats are in charge, when Republicans are in charge, when anyone is in charge, because they don't want a convention, because a convention is real change. So if you're in the status quo, they hate real change. So can the Republicans fight for a balanced budget amendment? Yes, they're doing it right now. You know what you do? You fight them on the substance. You know how easy it is to beat a balanced budget amendment? But Democrats in Washington are such losers. They're like, oh my God, what if we lose? What if we lose? Are you kidding me?
Why is it so easy to defeat a balanced budget?
Okay, here's what you say. Okay, hey guys, do you always balance your budget at home? Yeah, I do. No, actually you don't, do you? I mean, you have a mortgage, don't you? I mean, you're actually hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, aren't you? So if you had to balance your budget today, I'd have to take your house from you, wouldn't I? Didn't you finance your car? That's not a balanced budget. That's deficit financing of your car. So can I take your car too? Oh, well, I mean, if that's what you're talking about, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So a balanced budget makes no sense. Budget. Yeah, and the states sometimes don't grow enough. Do you have enough jobs in your state?
Well, the states balance our budget, and we issue bonds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so we make loans. That's like but we
And
still
some
balance
states
our
are
budget.
successful at that, and some states aren't.
Well, so it
Sometimes-
is possible to balance our budget. We do it with the state.
Right, but it might not give you the best results. And in fact, you could balance your budget too.
But
Just
in
sell
some
your
states,
home.
it does.
Sell your home and sell your car, and then you'll have a balanced budget at home.
Plenty of states have a constitutional amendment that they have to balance their budget. Why, if it works for a state, why wouldn't it work for the country?
Because it doesn't mean just because that they have it that it worked. Does
Well, I
Kansas
mean-
look like it's working?
Well, that's a function of tax cuts. But I mean, Connecticut, they working.
So I would argue, and if you ask, I know the local politics in Connecticut. Even Democratic voters say it's not working. Okay, it depends. Sometimes you need an investment. Sometimes you need a loan. Sometimes you need to have
You
a
can
balanced
still get
budget.
loans with a balanced budget.
Okay. Well, it depends on how you do it, but you can't have it at the end of the year. You have to balance it by the end of the year. So it is a terrible idea. It would allow us not to
I'm
invest
just saying
in
I'm not as convinced that
but
like
Sam,
the
so
idea of-
you don't have to win the argument with everybody, and you don't have to win it with 51%. In order for them to get an amendment, they have to win that argument in 38 states. States like Rhode Island, Hawaii, Connecticut, California. They're not going to win that argument in 38 states. And if you say, because maybe the Republicans can use it, let's unilaterally disarm and never have the progressives call for a convention. And in fact, say a convention is illegitimate, you've done great damage to the cause of change.
I mean, I'm still skeptical, frankly. I mean, I think I'm even arguably skeptical about the idea that, I mean, public financing, I think, is something that we can get that without having an amendment. I mean, that we can do. We can
Until the Supreme Court knocks it down.
Right, and I think.
And where are we getting it? Are we getting it through this corrupt Congress? The whole point of going to the states is because this corrupt Congress in Washington is never, ever going to fix it itself.
I'm from New York, so I can tell you that when we talk about corrupt legislatures, New York is I would put the level of corruption up there.
So
pretty
I'm not
high as well.
naive in
But-
thinking that the states are pure and angels, but at the same time, they have shown over and over again in our experience with our 35,000 volunteers. By the way, wolf-pack.com if you want real change.
Right.
Okay, that actually they do listen to you. I went and talked to Jamie Raskin when he was a state senator in Maryland. You know what he did? He did the research that I asked him to do. Of course, he's not going to take my word for it. He's a constitutional scholar, and he's like, "Oh my God, Cenk, you're right." And he changed his mind. I didn't offer him any money. I didn't offer him anything. And at the time, I'm even less well-known, nothing. He just had an open mind. Go ask Jamie Raskin, one of the most progressive guys in Congress.
Yes.
He'll tell you Article 5 convention makes a ton of sense.
I will do that, actually.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to Jamie Raskin. Cenk, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Sam.
Wolf-pack.com.
That's right.
Also, Justice Democrats. Thanks so much for coming by. I'll catch up with you in a bit.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Sam.
All right, folks, we got to take a quick. Joining me now, Javier. I don't have a.
Good morning.
Now, Javier Lopez, you are from. What is the name of the firm that you're from?
Kozak, Tropin, and Throckmorton.
Okay,
Down in Miami.
Kozak, Tropin, Throckmorton. We met last night. I want to. You have a fascinating story about a case that you were involved with, and partly as a function just of your family background. So,
Correct.
Tell me about first off, your first generation, or are you
First generation.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents were born in Cuba and came when they were 7, 8 years old. So in the early '60s. My dad was raised in Jersey, and my mom came straight to Miami.
And so, all right. So, how did you come across this case? Give us the facts of the case.
Well, when I first heard about it, the Miami Herald had broke the story, and I thought it was a joke. What happened was, so I'm the president of the Cuban American Bar Association down in Florida, which we're the largest voluntary bar organization down there. We've got about 5,000-6,000 members. And one of my past presidents sent me a story that was about to come out in the Miami Herald, and it had to do with Carnival Cruise Lines. Carnival Cruise Lines they were the first permitted cruise line in 55 years to go from Miami to Havana.
And this is following the Was this following the liberalization by Obama?
Oh yeah, this
Okay.
was this past May
Okay.
1st of 2016. After a couple of years of working some issues out, they permitted Carnival to go down and take the first cruise to direct from Miami to Havana in 50 plus years. So the facts are pretty straightforward. Our client called and tried to book a room for him and his daughter. He wanted to go and show his daughter his roots, and he has a pretty thick accent. He was born in Cuba. He's actually an Army veteran, and he likes to cruise because he's got 2 bad knees. He's got 2 knee replacements. So he was actually Carnival. He had the membership card. He was Carnival through and through. So he calls in and tries to book, and they ask him, where are you from, sir? Ironically, his name is Jose Marti, which
Okay.
is, I mean, he can't write a better story.
Right.
So he says that
Jose Marti, we should just tell people, was sort of the
he's Cuba's George
quintessential
Washington.
Cuban, yes,
basically.
freedom fighter.
Yes,
yes.
correct. So they ask, okay, you're from Cuba. Were you born in Cuba? Yes, I was born in Cuba. Well, sorry, sir, you can't come on our boat because people that were born in Cuba aren't allowed on our boat. We can offer you a bunch of other cruises to, St. Martin and all these other wonderful places, but you can't go on this boat. Those are the facts. So I get wind of this, and we immediately file suit, probably within 48 hours.
Is he on the phone going like, "What are you talking about? Like, why?"
He was very confused.
Did they give him a policy?
They
reason?
did.
What?
They did. So the reason is they said, look, this is not our policy. This is Cuba's policy. Cuba has a policy that if you were born in Cuba, whether or not you're a United States citizen, you can't go back by boat.
But you can go back by plane.
Oh yeah, right, which makes even less sense. So the reason, the history behind this particular policy was during the Mariel boat lift. Cuba didn't want to reverse Mariel. So apparently they thought that these people that were risking their lives to leave Cuba on a raft might want to go back on
They
a
may
boat.
get to Miami. So they're like,
It's a totally ridiculous.
I'm going to get back in the
Yeah.
boat and go back.
I'm going to go back. Totally. Anyways, it was on the books for 30 years or whatnot. So Carnival said, look, since we're traveling to Cuba, we have to abide by their law. That was the reason. So we brought suit. We brought 2 class action lawsuits, one in federal court and one in state court. And basically the premise is when we tried to.
And who's the defendant?
Carnival. Actually, Carnival and their subsidiary. It's called Fathom. Fathom is the name of the boat.
Okay.
But it's Carnival Cruise Lines, and we brought suit, and our position was very simple. We said, listen, we don't care what the law of Cuba is or the law of Africa is or the law. It's a discriminatory policy, and you, Carnival, are here in the United States, and the laws of this country are applicable to you, and a layperson knows that you cannot discriminate based on race, and obviously national origin. So that's wonderful that Cuba has that discriminatory policy, but you guys have to abide by our laws. So it was pretty remarkable because I remember right after we filed suit, the initial reaction by Carnival was, it's a baseless, frivolous lawsuit. But within about 5 days, the court. I remember the judge, Judge Marcia Cook. She was on vacation because it's obviously a wheel, and we filed for an emergency injunction saying they can't. This boat can't leave if this policy is in place. So she flew back because this thing was getting national, international media, and you can imagine in Miami. I mean, there were riots going on against. I mean, this was just a terrible PR for Carnival. And when we showed up for the emergency injunction hearing, they announced that they were not going to be going to Cuba as long as that policy was in place. So she basically held off and said, okay, we'll meet next week because we had case law that says, you have this policy in place. We don't have to wait for Cuba to do anything. You need to make this change irrespective of what Cuba does. But miraculously, within 3 days of that hearing, when Carnival announced they weren't going to go and they weren't going to implement the policy, Carnival, Cuba, for the first time since Castro took over, explicitly they changed the policy.
Because they wanted Carnival to show up.
Of course they did, right? I mean, it really ends up being about money.
Right, and it's like a cascading leverage, right? I mean, you guys leverage U.S. law to make Carnival change their policy. Carnival then, by them essentially saying we're not going to go to Cuba, because forces Cuba to change its policy.
Correct. And it's interesting because over the last, 5 and 6 administrations, however many it's been since 1960, no
policy.
I don't think anybody even knew about that policy.
Huh.
But I'm talking in more general, kind of 20,000 foot level.
Right.
Obviously, Cuba did whatever they wanted. But now we're seeing, well, if you want to play ball, and there's a lot of businesses that want to go to Cuba because it's really an untapped market.
Right.
I mean, it's a humongous market. You're starting to see companies use American law to try and change, at least in some way, Cuba policy. So there's people that are pro-embargo, anti-embargo, pro-travel to Cuba, anti-travel to Cuba. The way I see it is, regardless of what you think about the opening up of relations with Cuba, it's irrelevant at this point because it's happened. That boat has left the port, if you will, and it's not going to change even with this administration. I don't think it's going to go back. So you got two options: either, and some of our past presidents think this way, Cuban American bar presidents, not U.S. presidents, that they don't want to engage. They want to stick their head in the sand. They can't believe this is happening. So we're not even going to discuss it.
Just for the sake of people who are not familiar with the evolution of the Cuban population in Florida, and as a surrogate for the rest of the country, there's an evolving relationship with Cuba and perspective on it. Just give us some very broad strokes on that, because I'm not sure that people know exactly, like, when you say they don't want to deal with what's happening, it's because they were hoping that this embargo and isolation would continue on forever. Give us a sense of why and how they thought that would happen.
Well, the reason, the embargo was put into place to try and choke out the Castro regime. But obviously, I don't think anybody on whatever side of the issue you're on can argue reasonably that it's worked. Obviously, it hasn't worked. So there's a lot of folks that think that this embargo should stay in place because it's putting more pressure on the Cuban government. But the fact of the matter is that you look at what's happened, and first of all, it's not an embargo. It's like Swiss cheese. We're able to.
It's a unilateral embargo, but there's plenty of stuff that the Europeans.
But not
Canadians,
even Europeans. The U.S.
Right.
There was a cash exception
right.
to the embargo.
Right.
We have an embargo, but if you deal with us in cash, we're one of the largest poultry exporters to Cuba for the past 15 years. That's not an embargo.
Right.
So and slowly it's been eroding. So the other school of thought is, well, flood it with capitalism, open it up, and see, because I think everybody has the same goal, which is obviously to not have a dictatorship in Cuba. And really the embargo, the Helms-Burton Act, was pretty simple in terms of the way it could be. It was an automatic lift if there was free and fair elections, freedom of the press, and release of political prisoners. If those three things happened, the embargo would be lifted by law. So that's a little bit of the background on the embargo.
It always occurred to me that the idea with the reason why the embargo was so fully supported was that there was a hope that there would be a catastrophic failure in Cuba, because that was the best chance for people whose property was nationalized or businesses were taken over or whatever it was, for them to get their money back, basically to get it back.
That was definitely part. That was definitely part of it.
That without a catastrophic failure, they won't get it back, because we're going to see, as we liberalize 50 years later now, 60 years later, our relationship with Cuba, that there's going to be negotiations, and maybe most of that will not come back.
Absolutely. I mean, my family, my grandfather had a couple of hotels, and they were doing pretty well in Cuba, and obviously they left and got to this country with literally the clothes on their backs. But you're right. It's been 60 years, so you can't go back and say, hey, I know you've been here for 60 years, but that's my house.
Right.
So that's going to be a very interesting negotiation about how to compensate these individuals, or even if they get compensated. Who knows?
Right.
That's a long debate for another day. But yes, the embargo was put into place hoping that the Cuban government would fail, and they would be forced to go against them.
Give me the sense of what Cubans of your generation now, what the perspective is.
My generation's shifting in terms of opening up negotiations and travel to Cuba. And I think with every generation that passes, it's going to get more so, because they weren't directly affected per se. They weren't born there, and I had grandparents that were, they lived it, and we talked about it every single day. My great uncle was the longest held political prisoner in the world. His name is Mario Chanes. He passed away. Mario Chanes de Armas, who grew up with Fidel, went to school with Fidel. They were really good buddies, slept over each other's house, and he was one of 5 comandantes, let's say we'll call it a general, in the Revolutionary Army. They were arrested together in '54, and the revolution wasn't for communism. It was for a change, because the predecessor, Batista, wasn't a very good guy either.
Right.
And then when Castro takes over, that starts showing his true colors, my uncle says, listen, I don't, in a nutshell, I don't agree with this. So he was arrested for treason, and his trial, if you want to call it a trial, lasted 30 minutes. It was 30 minutes, and in 30 minutes he was tried to 30 years in prison.
Wow.
And he served every single day of that sentence.
Wow.
Now, he had opportunities to get out, but an example that he when he came over, he's a very soft-spoken guy. He came over in '93. Thanks a lot to the Clinton administration that was involved, because once he served his time, his 30 years, he wasn't let off the island for another 3 years. But thanks to the Clinton administration. Actually, it's funny because I have a little picture of me when I was 13 when he came over. I was born in '80, got here in '93, and we went up to the White House, met with President Clinton in the Oval Office for a couple hours, and it was an amazing opportunity. But so he came over, and I'd ask him, talk to me. People ask him to write books and whatnot. And one example, in terms of the type of techniques they would use to break him. One was when he went into prison, his wife was pregnant. So he never met his son really outside of prison. His son was little Mario
Wow.
Jr., and he went in to get his tonsils out when he was 15 years old in 1975. And we don't know what happened, but he died on the table.
Oh.
Castro himself comes to Tío Mario's Uncle Mario's cell. Says, listen, Mayito passed. The funeral's tomorrow. If you want to go, you can go. But there's one condition. So the political prisoners had the political prisoner uniform. And then the common prisoner uniform for the murderers and rapists and whatnot was very different. Says you can go, but you have to wear the common prisoner uniform. You cannot wear the political prisoner uniform. And my uncle said, no, I won't do it. So he didn't go. And 6 years later, it was a very similar story, but with Tio Mario's father. My great-grandfather said, hey, the old man passed away. Funeral's tomorrow. You can go, but you got to wear the common prison uniform. He said, I'm not going to do it. Some people say, well, hey, why not just, why go through 30 years of that? It's a different generation. It's a different time. I mean, he believed what he believed. He was very strong in that. So that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Well, it's a fascinating story, Javier Lopez. Thank you so much for joining us, and
I appreciate it.
It's just an amazing personal story, and also, a great example of how trial lawyers can create a sort of cascading change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, folks, we will have with us next. Chris Palos is around here. Okay.
I love trial lawyers.
I'm looking around. I saw him. He wandered off because he was here, and I don't have his number per se. I'm going to look into that Wolfpack stuff.
I more questions than answers after that little debate you had.
Yeah, and it was something that only occurred to me. I didn't have my notes. It is only something that has occurred to me as he brought it up, and so I wasn't quite prepared for it. He wasn't quite prepared for it, and I feel like I don't know. There's a lot of stuff left on the table, as it were.
Yeah.
Speaking of the table. I am up, ladies and gentlemen, $300. Wait a second. I'm trying to find.
Very good.
Did you hear that?
No.
Hear that? Wow. You didn't hear that?
Nope.
Did that not come across?
Here. Wow.
You did hear a wow?
No, I did it for you.
Your wow's not coming through.
My wow is not coming. Hold on. Let me try that again.
You love $300.
Wow! There you go.
Oh my God.
Loud
That was
and
way
clear.
too loud.
Yes.
Way too loud. But that's how I was pretty excited about it. $300, ladies and gentlemen, at blackjack.
Sam,
Yes.
I'm very happy for your winnings in blackjack, but maybe you could give a shout out to the Patreon people. It's been going really well.
Oh, well, thank you on the YouTubers. Thank you, YouTubers. Way to go, YouTubers.
Great.
Speaking of
fucking
which,
people.
I've got the camera here. Hold on. I know that somebody is texting a guy. Hold on for 1 second. But back to me. Yes.
Matt was so upset about the Wolfpack thing.
Now, which
He
part
was
about it was
livid.
he upset about?
Nothing. More to the point that he was not engaged in that debate.
You know what? Oh, here we go. Wait
Do
a
you need
second.
to take a second?
Yeah, folks, just give me 1 second.
Yeah, give him a second.
Okay. Just play some music,
Play
Matt.
some music. He needs a minute.
The pale face that's haunting me.
Are we back?
We are back.
Are we back?
Yes.
We're back. You got.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're here.
Yes.
Are we back?
Yes.
Guys?
Yeah, we're back. We're back.
Guys, are we back?
Yes. Why can't he hear us?
Are we back?
Yes, Sam. You can't hear us, but we can hear you.
Are we back? Hello, guys?
Yeah. We're back.
Oh,
Sam.
we're back?
Yeah.
Okay. I cannot hear you. Hold on. Sorry. Now I got you. You back?
Is that what was going on?
What a doofus!
Yes.
Oh my God! And you had
Sorry,
a little
guys.
conniption.
Well, I couldn't hear you.
I
couldn't
hear nothing.
There was no way to connect.
Okay, well we're good. We're all good.
All right, Chris,
Yeah.
will you just come over here a little bit more and just back a little bit that way would be great. Yeah.
That looks good.
Get you more in frame. All right, great. Joining me now, Chris Paulos. He is an attorney with Levin Papantonio. What do you specialize in?
I specialize in a few different types of areas of the law, predominantly medical device and pharmaceutical, product liability litigation, environmental litigation, and Federal False Claims Act litigation, essentially fraud against the government, representing whistleblowers.
And those are KETAM cases, is that right?
KETAM, yeah, that's how they're referred.
And, okay, so now I know that you're at, well, tell us about Abilify and give us a sense of like sort of also process. So first just tell us about Abilify. What is it and what seems to be the issue?
So Abilify is a drug that was manufactured by Otsuka Pharmaceuticals in Japan and distributed in the United States through Otsuka America and the Bristol Myers Squibb Company. It came out in about 2002 is when it was approved for being prescribed to American consumers, specifically for schizophrenia. And over the first several years, they reapplied for additional indications, including major depressive disorder, as well as bipolar disorder. So it's an antipsychotic medication that is used and specifically indicated for those three health issues. What we do know is that over the last 15 years, Bristol Myers Squibb and Otsuka have been telling doctors to prescribe it for many other conditions, essentially off-label promoting that drug to treat things for other psychological disorders or possible conditions that aren't actually indicated in the label for the drug.
Now, all right, this off-label prescribing, it seems to me, I've learned over the years, seems to be like ground zero for some of the biggest health problems that we have in this country, ranging from the opioid addiction through any of the issues that we're talking about here. But now, so it started off as an antipsychotic, and then there were two other, I guess, indications that it's
Yep.
used for. How were those other two added? Was that through clinical trials, through...
So in order to add indications to a drug, in order to be able to promote a drug to consumers for treatment of a specific condition, there is requirements for the pharmaceutical companies to submit information to the Food and Drug Administration through what's called a new drug application or an amended drug application. And that needs to demonstrate some efficacy in treating that condition, and also needs to demonstrate a balancing of the risk. Is that benefit that drug provides outweighed by any risk that it might provide? So this is all information that's provided to the FDA through the pharmaceutical company itself.
So the pharmaceutical company runs its own trials and reports it to the FDA.
That's right.
So there's no third-party validator of this. In other words, like, how often, in your experience, and you've been doing this now for a while, how often are there situations where the data provided to the FDA is incorrect?
Well, I mean, it varies. So math
And
is
by incorrect, I mean like ranging from, hey, we left out a couple of the negative results to all the way, through like, we just decided to slice it this way as opposed to that way because this way looks much better to us.
That's numbers are numbers, and it's how you define what numbers are, or how if you're looking, let's say you're just looking, you're doing a risk analysis of a drug, and you want to see how many people suffer from a specific condition from taking this drug. Well, when you do a study, you have to define how it is you're going to identify those particular cases, and that definition is subjective. It is made up by the pharmaceutical company to confirm, okay, this is a case that causes this particular condition, and this is one that we will report as a case that has caused this, that involves this particular condition. Oftentimes, in many cases that I've handled in the past, the way that condition is defined is pretty malleable and ends up excluding cases that should originally be included, which would then change the denominator of the risk-benefit analysis.
Does the FDA have very specific guidelines for that, or is it impossible to do that because it's too contextual each time?
Well, one would like to think that these studies are being peer-reviewed and evaluated by independent researchers, and they certainly try to make it appear that way. But invariably, on almost every case, we see studies that are paid for and conducted by the pharmaceutical company always show less risk than any study that is done by a truly independent research facility. And that just doesn't seem right.
What a coincidence that is. In a perfect world, the FDA would have the resources to, at the very least, provide some type of oversight for these studies.
The FDA would have. The FDA has some resources. Do they have enough? Absolutely no. And I think that's one of the things that we see. Oftentimes, when we're picking a jury in a pharmaceutical trial, you'll ask the jury during voir dire, how many people here think that the FDA conducts their own studies on medications? And many people raise their hand. And people actually believe that the FDA is the one that's out there in a laboratory somewhere studying these drugs. And that's just not true. All the information that the FDA relies on can come predominantly from the corporation or the pharmaceutical company who is marketing and selling this drug, who has invested upwards, sometimes billions of dollars to bring that drug to market.
Billions with a B, folks.
And then the FDA can also look at any other independent studies, peer-reviewed studies, and adverse event reporting that they have adverse event reporting systems that they can consider as well. And so they have those sources of data, but they're just usually a recipient of information, and they'll essentially take the corporation's word for it in terms of...
Because they have to.
They don't have any. They don't really truly have the resources to replicate the study that there's being told that was done to confirm or refute the findings of those studies.
And so, in many respects, and I want to get back to Abilify, but in many respects, essentially, what you guys are, and this is another example of it. Certainly saw it within the securities world too. You guys are basically deputies of these agencies in some way. We're going to round up a posse from the local townspeople. You guys are doing it, and you finance it through the awards, I should say, to your clients.
Well, essentially what happens is something will come to light that a drug is causing a certain condition. Sometimes and frequently it's through what's called the adverse event reporting system that the FDA has. When that is where healthcare providers can submit a case report to the FDA about something that may have happened in one of their patients. That's a condition caused by a drug they're taking, an anomaly that happens with a patient, and those...
And they don't necessarily make the connection.
No.
Oh, my patient's having this problem and they're on Abilify. It's just that I write up, my patient's having this problem. Here are the drugs they're taking, and they send that into the FDA.
Yep.
And then what happens with those reports? Are there resources at the FDA that start to correlate, to see correlations?
I mean, one would expect that's what's happening with this data, that it's being looked at, and the correlations with certain conditions. In the case of Abilify, what is it doing to people? What is it causing to happen in people? Abilify is a dopamine agonist. It has a dopamine agonist action, and basically it's a D2 receptor in the brain, and that portion of your brain is all about reward and pleasure. It controls those feelings that you have from any sort of situation that you're experiencing at that moment. The thrill of winning something, that rush that you get, that's chemicals in your brain mostly reacting with dopamine. Well, what Abilify does is it manipulates how your brain handles dopamine, and it's causing compulsive disorder in people who are taking it. Specifically, compulsive gambling, compulsive shopping, and hypersexuality. And that has been, through several studies now, been shown to, Abilify has been shown to increase that risk many times over what it would normally be in, say, a control group or a placebo group. And that is now finally being warned of in the label of the product. But the story of how that had to happen is pretty compelling, because what we do know is that is in the early 2000s, the drug came out in 2002, almost immediately after coming out, that we know that Bristol Myers Squibb and Otsuka Pharmaceuticals were getting case reports of unexplained compulsive behavior in Abilify users. So they were getting case reports very quickly after bringing it to market, and that was probably about 13 years before they ever bothered to put a warning on the label in the United States that this drug can cause these conditions.
And not only that, it, as you said before, it sounds like they knew it was happening in these patients who were getting it for schizophrenia and these other two indications, but did they start to promote the off-label sales of this during that period where they're getting this information?
Well, and I want to tie this back to the adverse event reporting. We know that between 2009 and 2011, the FDA received 4,599 adverse event reports for Abilify. 159 of those were for children. Abilify was indicated for adults. Giving a drug to a child that isn't indicated for a child is another off-label situation. We also know that there are other psychological conditions or emotional conditions, simply just depression, that Abilify was being promoted as an enhancement to, say, an antidepressant. So if somebody's Prozac wasn't working right, then Abilify would be added to that regimen to help increase the effectiveness of the original antidepressant that they were on. We know that Bristol Myers Squibb, they paid almost $11 million to tens of thousands of doctors to meet with them and tell them all the benefits of these drugs. Well, a doctor isn't just going to make a decision to give somebody a drug in a vacuum. There's a reason doctors were prescribing these drugs for things that they were not indicated for. And it was because the company itself was encouraging doctors to do that.
All right. So how, if not necessarily in this instance, because, and I don't know, maybe you can make those assessments in this instance, but broadly speaking, what are the mechanisms in which that happens? I mean, I remember being on a train with a guy who was part of the internal operation, I can't remember the drug company now, where it was his job to make sure that sales reps weren't going out to the doctors and saying, like, hey, Dr. Stevens down the road is having a lot of success with this drug. I know it's indicated for X, but he's also having really good weight loss results with this drug. So I'm just saying, you may want to prescribe it for weight loss, even though that's not indicated. I mean, that to me sounds like the first order of how that happens, right?
I mean, that's textbook off-label promotion, which is, under the FDA regulations, improper. Now, corporations have come up with...
Is it improper or is it illegal?
It's illegal. I mean, it's improper. However, corporations now, because, after Citizens United, they're people, and they're now saying the FDA regulations that don't allow them to go into a doctor's office and tell them to prescribe a drug for which they have no evidence that it is effective to treat a condition, that violates their First Amendment rights.
That's fascinating. I interviewed someone, Michael might remember who it was. I think it was a piece in the Washington Monthly, I believe. And people can, yes, Haley Sweetland Edwards, right, about corporations using the First Amendment on a wide array of issues, ranging from you can't force us to tell our employees to wash their hands, you're inhibiting our First Amendment rights, to all sorts of OSHA regulations. And I hadn't heard that they were. That's fascinating. Has that been challenged?
Those issues are being litigated. One context in which they are being litigated is under the False Claims Act cases, where off-label promotion is considered a false claim. So when, say, Medicaid or Medicare is billed for the use of a drug, but it's being billed for a non-indicated use, that shouldn't be a compensable claim. And if they are out promoting the off-label use of drugs, that in and of itself, when it results in a payment by the government for that, is a false claim. So under that regulatory scheme, we're seeing these False Claims Act cases being brought based on off-label marketing and improper promotion. And one of the pages out of the playbook these days is to kick and scream about the corporation's First Amendment rights. Essentially, they're saying it's our right to go into a doctor's office and tell them whatever we want because we know more about our drugs than anybody else. But at the same time, they don't have to have any evidence that what they're promoting that drug for actually does what they're telling them to do with it. Will it cause somebody, or will it fix somebody's condition that they may be experiencing? They can go in and say, yes, it does. And just like what you described, Dr. Jones down the street, he's got a couple patients that have X, Y, and Z, and now they're doing great. You'll see that's pretty blatant.
Right.
Very rarely would you actually find that evidence of that happening. But you can look at the numbers of prescriptions that are being written versus the number of conditions that those patients that are receiving those prescriptions have to see a trend. And you can also, you see subtle efforts of, what they'll do is they'll retain what are called key opinion leaders, or people most knowledgeable. And these are people who are respected in the scientific community or the medical community, they will put on their payroll.
Right.
So when they come to a conference or they are in a room full of doctors, they just happen to say, I use Abilify when I'm treating my patients. And that starts to give credibility to the product.
Now, hasn't there been any statutes as of late to prevent that, the payments by drug companies to doctors?
Well, there's a law called the Stark Act that really regulates kickbacks. So a doctor can't receive anything of value in order to be induced to use a medical device or a product,
from
or to send a referral
me to have,
somewhere.
A guy who works at Johns Hopkins as a professor go to a medical conference and say incidentally, Abilify, we found
Yeah. So that necessarily wouldn't be a kickback because that doctor's not being paid to write prescriptions.
Right.
They're being paid to be a spokesperson for the product. And so, they start to toe the line pretty closely with those types of relationships. But the unfortunate effect that has is it legitimizes, or it gives the appearance that these doctors themselves have done these studies. Maybe they've done an analysis of the effect on their patients, and it's simply not true. And doctors should, and I believe are required, particularly if they're part of a board certification process, to disclose those sort of financial histories. And what's oftentimes when we're dealing with doctors in cases, those financial relationships aren't either fully disclosed or adequately disclosed.
So where is the Abilify case now? Where in the stage of the process?
So there were multiple cases filed against these defendants around the country, and several months ago, the Judicial Panel on Multi-District Litigation consolidated the cases in the Northern District of Florida in front of the Honorable Judge Casey Rogers. And so that case is now being centralized in that court, and I think there's approximately 200 cases on file now. But what's kind of interesting in this case is that the judge is in an order where the plaintiffs are required to identify cases that they're investigating and are imminently going to file, to give the court an idea of what resources it might require to handle these cases. And at this point, the last time I saw the numbers, there are over 3,500 cases that have been registered as cases that there's a fundamental basis to believe that this might be a case involving Abilify and a compulsive disorder. And so, these cases that we're seeing involve families that have been destroyed financially, marriages that have been destroyed because when somebody has a compulsive, uncontrollable urge to gamble, they try to hide it, they lie about it. So we see families being destroyed. We've seen people going to prison or to jail or being arrested for crimes that they're committing because they're trying to get access to funds to support this compulsive disorder that this drug has caused. So the impact on the folks who've suffered these consequences has been staggering for me to actually come to terms with as I look at those cases.
And Abilify has since put those warnings on.
Yeah, that's again, it's a pretty interesting story about how this all came about. So, of course, they start getting adverse event reports about compulsive gambling very early on when they bring it to market. And in October 2012, the European Medicines Agency, European regulators, were seeing a lot of compulsivity adverse events in France. And this was even in 2011. They just started seeing it, what they call safety signal. Something's going on with
How
people
long
on
it
this
had
drug.
been distributed in France at that point?
Right, since about 2002.
Okay.
And so the European regulators start asking more questions about it and look at the study, look at the adverse events reports, and make the decision that they need to change the label. They need to warn consumers that this is an effect of this drug. So the defendants put that warning on the label in Europe. They never put it on the label in the United States. And then Canada comes in, their regulators force them to put the warning on their label, and so they do it in Canada. They never do it in the United States.
Because they know it inhibits sales, right? I mean,
yeah, of course. If a drug company could have the shortest warning label they possibly could, they would, because they don't want to scare people away from the product. They don't want to have something.
Even at the cost of warning somebody that, like, hey, when you're on this, keep an eye out for compulsive behavior. If you have it, tell your doctor. Your doctor will take you off the drug.
Yeah, and so they also, let's keep in mind that it's a competitive industry. So if you have a competitor's product that purports to cure or treat the same conditions, but they don't have X, Y, and Z warnings on their label, then a doctor's looking at the efficacy of the two products and then which one has more risk. A doctor is going to give, I would hope, their patient the safest product to treat the condition that they have. So it kind of the labeling evolution of Abilify is even a little more strange than I've seen in a lot of
Super
cases.
creepy.
So what they did, in around, I want to say, January of 2016, they changed the not the package insert, they changed the package insert, which is something that the doctors will usually see, not frequently, but they didn't change what's called the medication guide, and that is what the consumer is supposed to get and read.
Wow.
So they did this really slow rollout of the warning, and they started using, there's been some gambling reports of gambling here and there, and they made it really soft and not too concerning. And it wasn't truly until around May of 2016 when they finally stepped up to the plate and added the compulsive disorders that this drug causes to all of the materials which are designed to educate consumers about what this drug can do to them.
It's just another one of the really messed up stories I hear.
Yeah, I mean, well, and we know that the Bristol Myers Squibb, they got hit pretty hard for their marketing, what we would consider improper marketing of the drug. They had to pay a $515 million penalty under the False Claims Act for the off-label marketing of the drug. So, I mean, that's pretty staggering number. But keep in mind that this is a drug that was one of Bristol Myers Squibb's top-selling products and made Bristol Myers Squibb's $2.3 billion in 2013 alone.
In 2013 alone?
Yes.
Holy crap.
So that shows you the
stakes.
The analysis that a company can do and say, hey, it's a cost of doing business.
Unbelievable. Chris Paulos, thank you so much. Really fascinating story. Good luck with the litigation if it comes to that. All right, folks.
If you're gonna be a compulsive gambler, just win. What's the problem?
Right. Just win.
I prefer my compulsive gamblers who win, but that's just me.
So what are we? All right,
You want to do some sound, or do you have?
Yeah, let's
guest?
do some sound. We're running a little long here.
A little bit.
Just a little bit. Cenk Uygur, that guy can talk.
I knew as it was going, I was like, oh, this is pretty tight. And then Wolfpack came up, and we were all like, oh, all right, here we go.
All right, so as you know, the Trump administration released what they called was a tax plan yesterday. And, here, wait a second. Let me reposition my camera.
It's a blueprint.
Yeah, I got to get a better. Tomorrow, maybe we'll talk about that tax plan. Yeah. All right, there we go.
Seeing how the sausage is made here.
What's that?
I like that. The off-camera.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, David Pakman's in town. There's a lot of folks in town, and but I've got to do some other pre-records for Ring of Fire. Coming up a little bit. What's that?
David Pakman plus others.
Plus others. There's a lot of people around.
Pakman plus.
Mostly David Pakman.
No, I mean, I think we may have Max Blumenthal on tomorrow.
Very good.
Cenk Uygur was here. So,
Cenk yogurt.
So, as you know, the Trump administration released what they're calling a tax plan. It is not a plan as much as it is like just sort of a statement that more or less boils down to, we're going to cut everybody's taxes, not so much middle class taxes, but
it's a mission statement for inequality. It's a vision.
Right. It is a huge vision. And tomorrow, I think Dave Pakman has really dug into the details to the extent that you can dig into details where it's not where there's no details. But here is Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, who did not have a lot of things to provide in terms of answers. But here he is being asked, hey, isn't it the case that, like, these taxes, I mean, it's almost as if, like, what Donald Trump did was, God, I hate this tax, I get hit by that. I hate that tax, I get hit by that. That AMT tax and no deductions in these states, man, that's one of the things that really irks me when I have to sign that check to the government.
Those are
Let's get
more
rid
of
of
the
those.
ones we got to get rid of. I mean, you just look at it. I can actually really go through this at a very personal level.
Here's Steve Mnuchin responding to that question, like, hey, isn't this going to lower Donald Trump's taxes a lot?
Why don't the American people have a right to know how this will affect President Trump?
Again, I'm not sure what the American public has lots of information on the president's financials. He's released more information, and people have lots of information. And the American public, you saw, people voted for the president, and
you say he's released more information. He's the only president in modern times who hasn't released since Nixon, who hasn't released his tax returns. That's not more information. That's far less.
Again, this is about American jobs. The Trump economic plan is about creating jobs, 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 and economic growth. And we're tired of, in this country, having the highest business tax rates, taxing on worldwide income, and leaving trillions of dollars offshore. It's not a surprise that American business has left $1 trillion offshore.
Hey, George,
wow.
President Trump will release his taxes when I have a neck, okay? It's not going to happen.
First off, let me just, I mean, aside from the fact that obviously he's dodging the question, he's confusing the words more with less and released with not released. He also, this notion that they're framing it, and as Cenk and I said earlier, there was a plan that the Democrats had too. There's no money trapped overseas. That money is not trapped overseas. It is people who don't want their tax deferral, which is what it is, to end. When you make money overseas, the U.S. government during the Eisenhower administration allowed for a deferral of those taxes. You didn't have to pay it at the end of the year. You could pay it when you repatriated that money because you wanted to build U.S. businesses' involvement overseas. And that would encourage investment overseas and whatnot. And corporations learned in the lead up to the 2004 American Jobs Creation Act that George Bush passed, that if they waited long enough, they would get a tax holiday. And they got a tax holiday. 5% taxes instead of the 35% taxes that they were supposed to pay on that money. It was ostensibly going to go towards providing jobs. And all you need to do is Google it to find out that even those companies that pushed for it ended up cutting thousands of jobs. And 86 to 96% of it, I think it was, just ended up in shareholders' pockets as dividends or buybacks.
Well, the taxes are just so high.
And so this whole framing of like the money's trapped over there. It's trapped. It's not trapped.
We need a team from Goldman and a couple of hedge funds to get put on ski masks and go crack the money open that's stuck in the EU.
There's another way that you can get that money back. And you say, hey, you know how we defer taxes until you repatriate it? We're not doing that anymore. You've got to pay your taxes at the end of the year, just like with your profits that you make in this country, you've got to pay for those taxes. And the idea of double taxation, understand that if they pay local countries' taxes, they can deduct that from the taxes they owe the U.S. government. So that's also sort of a canard. And I heard the other day Tim Carney on TV saying, like, well, just lower the tax rate so that people don't have to expend so much time and money avoiding taxes. Yeah. Here
if you
is
just lowered the penalty for killing somebody, maybe it'd be less complicated to prosecute those cases.
We'll play these, and here is, of course, the pitch from Mnuchin on why we need these tax cuts. But he's asked, like, hey, can you guarantee that there will not be a raise in taxes on the middle class? And he can't even promise that.
Okay.
Can you guarantee that no one in the middle class is going to pay more?
That's our objective, absolutely.
Is it a guarantee?
I can't make any guarantees until this thing is done and on the president's desk, but I can tell you that's our number one objective in this.
He goes on. Now, remember, this is their tax plan, but they have no idea what's in it. Here is also a question about tax cuts for the wealthy.
I'm seeing no absolute tax cuts for the wealthy.
Again, what I'd say, that's the objective, but we're working with Congress, we're working with the House and the Senate, we're having listening sessions, and this is about turning it into a bill that will get signed.
But the objective is no absolute tax cuts for the wealthy.
That's the objective, and we'll see where we get from here.
What does that mean, no absolute tax cuts?
Well, I think that in a metaphysical sense, there are no literal absolutes for a tax cut. It's not an absolute thing. I wonder if that was the thing, like, our objective is to not kick you out of your home, old lady, and foreclose on you. That certainly is the objective.
Right. No, our objective is not for you to get kicked out of your home. Our objective is to make as much money as possible. Just so happens as a byproduct.
Right.
You get kicked out of your home.
Can you imagine sitting next to that disgusting face, and he's just like, okay, our goal, okay, is not for you to be kicked out of your home, okay? But I also want to produce Hollywood movies. So if that means that you and your family are homeless, then, I mean, okay, it's not our objective, but it's a byproduct, okay? But it's not absolute.
It's not absolute. All right, let's also, over the past, 48 hours now, we have Trump, I believe, has dropped his demands that the Democrats vote for a bill that would fund the wall with U.S. taxpayer money. I don't know what's going to happen. My understanding is also that he issued a secret threat to Nancy Pelosi that we're going to cut the funding for Obamacare. While simultaneously making a deal with supposedly the Freedom Caucus to provide a even worse replacement bill for Obamacare than the one that was getting 17% approval. Meanwhile, here is the Republican National Committee chair, Ronna Romney McDaniel. And she's basically telling Donald Trump, like, look, we're going to have a problem if you don't keep any of your promises at all.
Yeah, so especially, I think more than anything else, Ronna, that promise is just something that's not something there's a lot of wiggle room on, or any wiggle room, because it became the mainstay of his rallies, the ones I attended. Of course, the ones every single rally. There wasn't a rally where he spoke where he didn't talk about this wall is going to get built, and of course then he added Mexico's going to pay for it. The crowd started chanting, and that thing doesn't get built for whatever reason, and I can see the campaign commercials already being cut. So then comes the problem: how's the wall going to get paid for if we have members of Congress who behind closed doors, and I know this for a fact, are laughing about the idea of a wall getting built? How do we convince them to do the right thing on this?
Pause it 1 second. That's, of course, talk radio host Laura Ingraham asking the RNC committee chair. One question she's not asking is, like, why are they laughing about that wall? Oh, because it was a joke from the beginning? That question she's not asking. She's asking, like, hey, what happens if? Go ahead, continue.
Well, they're going to lose the trust of our base. If we don't keep our promises, our base is going to walk away. And they're going to feel like, hey, you said one thing on the campaign trail to get elected, and then you didn't. act on it. And right now the base is very happy with the president. He's taking decisive action on trade. I mean, you saw yesterday or the day before when they're talking about Canada and some of the unfair things they've been doing with NAFTA, TPP. You've seen jobs coming back. You've seen our national security standing rise in this country. I mean, action.
Wow. I know there's. I mean, this is like it's like an Escher painting, right? I mean, like they're laughing at people about this idea of the wall. Meanwhile, she goes off to list a list of things that he has again broken his promises. The idea that our national security standing has risen in some fact is ridiculous. The idea that jobs have come back is ridiculous. The idea that, I think, to be fair, by the time she said this, she wasn't aware that he'd already reversed himself on the NAFTA thing. And TPP was already dead.
President Obama, though, never had the balls to sit next to the Chinese premier and shove chocolate cake in his mouth and be like, you know what? Just launched a couple of Tomahawk missiles because of beautiful babies. What do you think about that?
How's chocolate cake?
Yeah, how's the chocolate cake?
What else? Is there any more on that one, Matt?
That's good.
No, that was it.
Stunning.
Not really, right?
Even when complaining about him not maintaining his promise, they are lying about him maintaining his other promises.
Also, are we sure the base is going to walk away if he folds on this promise?
I'm not so sure of that.
They might not even notice.
Well, no, I think you're starting to see it, though. I think with the focus group on CNN with the supporters from New Hampshire, which is like the escape hatch is that it's so corrupt and it's so unfair that we're in a really bad place because even the greatest negotiator of all time can't break the liberal stronghold over not building a wall or whatever.
They're just mad that he's draining the swamp.
Yeah.
It's so dry in that drained swamp that he can't get the moisture he needs to do what he's doing.
Yeah, because your average lobbyist and member of Congress is like, I'm just so livid that you made it easier for oil companies to bribe foreign governments. We're not going to build the wall.
Let's... Matt, where'd you get this clip?
I think that at Yashar on Twitter, the Bill O'Reilly one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, he posted this.
So this is a clip of Bill O'Reilly interviewing Susan Rabin, author of 101 Ways to Flirt. And when was this? In 1997.
Loofah, alcohol.
And in 1997, he was already lamenting the fact that you gotta really be careful in the workplace. Oh, here.
Question of the day, is it politically correct to flirt? I don't know. With all the public trouble between men and women, flirting may be obsolete. But wait, there's a new book called 100 Ways to Flirt, and the author, Susan Rabin, joins us now. So, I mean, flirting kind of dangerous these days, isn't it?
No. It's wonderful these days. When I started in 1984, people didn't believe in flirting. But it's a charming and honest interest and expression in another person. It has no serious intent, Bill. Now, that's really important because it had bad press for a long time. Mm-hmm. No serious intent, which is playful and friendly and charming and engaging.
I like it, but I see that there's a downside. And if you're married, you can flirt. There's no problem with that, right?
With your wife, it's nice, or your husband.
Right. Good. Just with your wife. If you're married, you can't flirt with anybody else?
No, you can, because it hasn't got serious intent unless the other person starts to object, and then you don't.
Right. But you see, that's the problem here, Susan, is that everybody's taking everything so seriously.
Well, that is the problem.
If you make a little joke, or if you smile at somebody, they're going, oh, so what's this deal?
So that's their problem, isn't it? We have a very serious disease in this country. It's called seriosity, and we really need to lighten up. And my mission, from my mission, and I've chosen to accept it, is to restore the ancient art of flirting. Lighten up, playful, live in the moment.
Well, you're up against it because I know a lot of guys just won't flirt anymore because they're just afraid, especially in the workplace. I mean, they just don't want to get involved.
But they don't know how to flirt, Bill. That's one of the problems. American men particularly don't know the charming, subtle art of flirting. It's a very subtle art.
Tell me about it.
Like the French do, right?
Like the French and the Brazilians and the Europeans. And it's cultural. In a way, it's cultural. We came from a very puritanical society, and we got this hypocrisy going. Yeah. So what I want really to do, is people to learn the subtle art, and then we won't have trouble.
All right, let's take me as the dummy here. I'm the subject. All right, so I'm sitting across from an attractive woman. You're an attractive woman. Now,
thank you.
Should I flirt with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and why should I do that?
Because you're going to make me feel good.
I'm
going to make you feel good. It's a win-win game. Everybody walks away happy. Now, in harassment, it's a win-lose or lose-lose.
Right.
Somebody feels bad.
All right, what's
but
my
flirts
first?
never make people feel
What's
bad.
my opening flirt?
Let's just
Well,
blow by
depends
that
on
harassment
situation.
thing.
Well, I'm sitting here with you. We're having coffee.
Oh, I was really hoping that you would notice my
Your little
flirting
ring.
prop.
Yeah, but
It's
that's
not
a
quite
gimmick.
so
I'm
little.
not a gimmick guy.
What a dick. I'm not
Oh
a
my
gimmick
God,
guy.
a gimmick guy.
I pretty much don't do flirting. I go
But
straight
please
to the
don't, talk
harassment,
about-
honey.
Yeah, don't talk about harassment. One of the things that I really try and focus on is not even being aware that the other human being has any feelings. So I don't worry about anybody, feeling bad.
So you're talking about two people having fun. Now, on the other hand, there's this friggin' black girl in the mailroom who's hot as anything, and I said, hey, hot chocolate. And then I made an ape noise. I don't know what her facial expression was. I don't know what her facial expression was. I know I was enjoying myself. Is that flirting, doctor?
No. That doesn't count as harassment if I have such power at work that they're afraid to express to me that they feel bad, so I can just assume they feel good. Is that because you want both people walking away looking good? How about if feeling good? How about one guy like me walks away feeling good and the other one pretends?
Yeah, how's about
Is that okay? Does that work?
Now, at what point in the flirting process does the hush money kick in?
How many millions of dollars will this whole flirting thing cost me? Because if I don't have to pay it, is there any chance I could make $20 million off this? If I cross that line?
Also,
25.
We know he's not above commenting on the ring, like he mentioned. Like, I don't like gimmicks. He commented on the woman's purse.
Well,
so
no, that was a
Great
sharp
purse.
criticism after she turned him down. He said the bag was ugly. And by the way, I just want to let everybody know that hot chocolate and animal noises is what he did. That's not comedy.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know about the
I'm quoting
animal
from the
noises.
accusation.
What?
Yes. Yep.
A lot of flirting, you just grunt at a woman.
Yeah, I don't do gimmicks. I'm not going to talk about your ring.
I don't know why I just got surprised about that. I apologize, everyone.
Can I
I'm
rub
so
some falafel on your
naive.
face? Then what about a food
God.
item? Can we work a food item into this?
Do we have that clip of Jesse Waters?
I did it yesterday.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, that was
and
great.
he's now gone.
Well, it's uncertain. They've announced that he's taking a vacation
Well, that's
for
what
the
they
rest
always
of
say.
for the rest of this week and for the weekend, but that might be just them delaying, saying he's off.
Jesse,
the 5.
no one talks about my daughter that way besides me.
But it was also, it wasn't just that. Everything he said before that was just, he's not bright.
Breathtakingly stupid.
Yeah, we said he's not ready for that.
Are you
to be in
just
the middle of that
realizing?
table.
Well, no. I've always realized that the guy is not bright. But when you put him in that context, right?
Right.
Like,
He's
it
not,
becomes,
he's not harassing a journalist on the street.
His
with
whole
stupid
thing
questions.
is that he's offensive.
Actually, let's do a
He's
dumb.
incredibly
Let's do a
offensive.
dumb bracket. Brian Kilmeade, Steve Ducey, Jesse Waters, Greg Gutfeld. Who makes it out of the first?
Bowling is the number 1 seed, I think, in this.
I don't think Bowling's the number 1 seed. I'm going to say
Ducey's the stupidest.
Kilmeade is dumber than Ducey, so I'm going to put him to the next round. And I'm going to say Waters is dumber than Gutfeld.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
And then I think Kilmeade wins.
The author, Kilmeade.
Kilmeade's dumber than Ducey? Really?
Kilmeade is really stupid. I don't know. Who do you think's dumber, Waters or Kilmeade?
Kilmeade comes off as more stupid than Ducey because he's so aggressive about it. Ducey, I always feel like he goes, well, okay.
Ducey's just basically,
I
I
know what
got
I'm
the
talking
morning
about.
memo.
That's like being just legit stupid.
Ducey's
He's not
like,
smart.
no, that just knows
But
where
I think-
your
I think
checks
it's
come
not
from.
just not
Right.
obnoxious
Kilmeade,
stupidity.
I feel like, is aggressively stupid.
Kilmeade's like,
That's
wait,
the
this is terrible. What's happening?
He
White
leans
people
in.
can't have coffee anymore.
Kilmeade leans into the stupidity.
Yeah, Kilmeade leans
Yes, that's and
But-
I feel like Waters does too, though. Like,
right.
here's a guy who really doesn't, he's
That's because he
convinced
thinks
he's right.
he's hilarious.
Yeah, he's smug.
Yes.
So who's dumber, Waters or Kilmeade?
Kilmeade.
I'm bowling.
We may need to bring him back to the 5 to find out. I think we need more time.
We should just call that. Yeah. Who's the dumbest?
Need more studies. Need more studies.
like Republicans and pesticides. Needs more study.
Needs more studies. Did you yesterday talk about how turns out the North Korea thing was just a field trip?
No, didn't get to the North Korea thing.
I mean, it turns out to be a non-story.
Yeah.
That they, I mean, over the past 24 hours, I've sort of reverted back to is this by design? Just this relentless generation of news. It's almost as if the only thing that is relevant to the White House is that they're talking about us.
Yeah, like the NAFTA thing yesterday.
Yeah.
Don't you think these people are also dumb enough to think, I mean, all right, it's a twofer, sure. If it's read that way, whatever. Why not? Why not instigate North Korea for no reason? It's not like anything bad could happen out of that. I found out, you know what they call the leader of North Korea in the Chinese press, Sam? They call him Little Fatty the Third.
Is that right?
Yes. Not in, in the more of the, tabloid for China, but they actually call him Little Fatty the Third.
Wow.
I wonder if she told Trump that. That's how they became friends. Wait a second, what? Little Fatty the Third? Ah, that's so good. That's like when I called Jeb low energy.
Just going back to the tax bullet point list that they put out yesterday, people started texting me, and I was doing something, and so I hadn't seen it. They're like, "Is this a thing? Is this how the tax plan?" And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm sure it's just dumb as fuck." And now that I've seen it, I'm like, "Yep, pretty much."
It's just a bullet point
it's
of
not a
taxes
thing
that you could reverse.
I just answered. I was like, "No, it's just something that's dumb as hell, and I don't even have to see it." The end. I was like, actual legislation is hundreds and hundreds of pages long. It's nothing. So.
I mean, people have already been able to sort of roughly analyze that the tax plan could cost up to $5 trillion over the course of a decade. Now, here's the thing where we've got to be careful, because it's easy to fall into this notion of the deficit and whatnot. I mean, the real issue here, to me, is less about the deficit and the debt, and more about our priorities and about wealth inequality, which the tax cuts are like a laser aimed at wealthier people. Repealing the individual alternate minimum tax is just a rich people's tax.
So good.
For a second, it sounded good, like lasers aimed at rich people, but I don't think it means
repealing the estate tax. Now, you're talking about people, I think it is $11 million. I think it is between a couple at this point. You get the first 11 million without being taxed. After that, I think it's 45%. I got to check.
So unfair.
It's so tough. So tough to pass the billions. There are other taxes. We'll talk about this tomorrow. But let's just play one more clip. I hate to see this type of fighting, ladies and gentlemen. I feel like I get enough of this at home, but to watch it with my Wheaties, I don't like it. Here is Morning Joe and Mika fighting like cats and dogs.
All these people saying that things are going better on the National Security Council, that didn't just happen.
Good.
There was a battle inside the White House, and guess what? Jared and Ivanka won.
It would be unreasonable to say that there are not any goods that may follow from nepotism, but it's still nepotism.
Well, as it was when my hero, my political hero,
we just talked about,
was appointed Attorney General for his brother. And Republicans didn't like that back then. I think if you looked at Bobby Kennedy's record, you'd say some good things came out of that. And no. Ivanka Trump and Jared.
Trump to Bobby Kennedy?
You don't have to be so snotty.
No,
I was
I'm
about to
just
say,
curious.
you didn't let me get it out. You don't have to be so rude.
Well, no,
The fact of the matter is that they are not Bobby Kennedy, as I was about to say, but you wanted to get your cheap shot in, so you got your cheap shot in. No, I'm not saying Jared
Some people
or
are,
Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy did a lot of things before he became Attorney General of the United States of America. But I am saying, just like when John Kennedy had a question, he called the one person he could trust in the world, Bobby Kennedy, to come into the Oval Office, and they sat there and talked.
Wow. Just really quick, Joe Scarborough's political hero is Bobby Kennedy? What the fuck?
Yeah.
He seemed really jacked up. Just a lot of Morning Joe.
They definitely had a bad night.
There's a lot of tension there.
Bad
I
night
want to
last night.
I want to add something that it was Bobby Kennedy's appointment to. Now, I think there's obviously, it's clear, Jared Kushner does not have the bona fides that Bobby Kennedy had. But following Bobby Kennedy's appointment,
I don't know.
There were laws put into place against nepotism. In fact, JFK could not appoint RFK as Attorney General, I think, today because of that. So, I don't know. Now, apparently, both Mika and Joe have taken the day off to sort things out.
JFK was quoted about making his brother Attorney General and the nepotism, that he wanted to give him a bit of law experience before he became a lawyer.
Want to give him a little workout. Being the top law enforcement official in the country is a good practice run. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go take a bath.
All right, well, folks, I'm not going to have time for IMs or calls today because we've run a little bit late. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to have more of this. I'm going to be speaking to Linda Lipson, who is essentially I guess you could call her a lobbyist for a lot of the issues that these lawyers fight for, or more broadly, broadly speaking, access to the courts. And I'll also be talking to Arthur Grant from Public Justice. I spoke to him, I think it was about a year ago, and he had this story about Remington rifles, which were firing by themselves.
Automated.
Proactive.
This is what we need. It's like Uber, but for gun. I don't know.
The guns shoot themselves, totally disrupting the gun shooting market.
And the trigger finger market's been completely disrupted. But apparently there has been new revelations in that case, very recent. And also want to find out what else he's talking, what else he's been doing. In addition, tomorrow I anticipate talking to David Pakman and to Max Blumenthal, who I believe will be here. So it's all that, folks.
Thanks,
was I supposed
Sam.
to do
You
a
look very
mid-roll today?
sharp.
What did you say?
What?
What?
Did I an ad today?
Huh?
Yes.
An ad? We did. I guess we'll do it tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
You look very sharp, Sam. I hope
well,
you're
thank
having
you.
a great time.
I'm having a great time. I'm up $300.
We heard.
I am up $300. Now, I anticipate having to give a little bit back to the casino. That's the way I like to work it. Give a little bit back, and then I take a little bit more.
First, I thought you were saying that you were anticipating having to give some of it to just Mila, like she just gets a third automatically somehow.
Well,
she's
I mean,
worked a deal
basically
on
what
you.
it is, it's the quality of the gift I bring back to the kids is basically This is what it's a function of.
Keychain.
It could end up being a keychain. It could end up being a blouse. We'll see.
You never know.
You never know. It's just like when you gamble.
That impression I did of you yesterday, coked out with strippers, seemed like a slightly more exciting experience.
I didn't hear that.
In the scenario, Sam, you were demanding that the girls' lingerie be Social Security text prints beyond them.
Do that.
And you love the coke you have, but it was really bothering your allergies and your nose.
When Chris Paulos was telling us about Abilify, like compulsive behavior, I was going to be like, oh, you mean like keep checking the status of the Social Security trustee fund?
You know what's great about that guy is he's so on target as he would have been like, yeah, I suppose that could work as well.
Yeah.
He just would have kept going.
But hopefully also run into some other, part of it is basically I just walk around and talk to these lawyers. I met Javier, who's, has an amazing personal story, and that story of the cruise line. So fascinating. All right, so I guess that's it from here. Matt will fire up the music. Folks, it's your support that makes the show possible. Become a member today at jointhemajorityreport.com. And also, you have just a couple more days left until April is over, which means that MR Spring 17 will not work for justcoffee.coop. So you got to check it out. 30% off of fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. MR Spring 17, justcoffee.coop. Also, MajorityReportKickback.com. Click on our Amazon or Jet.com links at that site, MajorityReportKickback.com. We get a kickback when you purchase your goods through those links. All right, folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.